Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Settle for More podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Wright, and I have designed this space for you. Yeah, you, the woman who is ready to walk out on her fears, step into her dreams, and own her power by shifting her mindset from feeling not enough to taking action and to becoming more than enough whilst settling for more. Hey there. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're settling into 2022. I hope that you are on the path to achieving your goals, your dreams, and those things that are really meaningful to you and the life that you desire. And of course, I believe that if you desire it, then you absolutely deserve it. And so, as I think about individuals who are setting goals and who are getting excited about the goals, sometimes we have these big, audacious goals and they excite us. And we set up, the plan that is required. We set out on a path to really achieve these goals. And sometimes, with all great intent, we somehow don't take action. Whether it's because we don't believe that we can actually do the things that we set out to do. Sometimes it's because we don't believe that we deserve the things that we want. Sometimes we believe that we're a fraud. Sometimes we feel like the spaces that we want to get into and the things that we want to do and the circles that we want to move in and just the space that we want to step into. Sometimes there is a feeling that we don't belong. Sometimes we even feel like everyone is going to find out that we don't deserve our achievement, right? And sometimes there is chronic self-doubt. Sometimes there is low confidence, even though you're skilled, even though you have a track record of doing things well. Sometimes these feelings and thoughts creep in and they really prevent us from really taking action or showing up as our best self. So if you've ever experienced any of this, could it be that you are plagued by the imposter syndrome? And that is when you start thinking that, irrespective of what you know and what you've been through, that your accomplishments aren't real and that you're secretly a fraud or a failure. Sometimes we have crippling anxiety and bad habits that are really ruining our chances of achieving the goals that we set out to achieve over a period of time. I want to ask you this. Does your low self-esteem and negative past experience influence your thought patterns? Do you fall into the trap of self-pity that really keeps you from seeing the positive outcomes? And so, if anything that I've said so far resonates with you, I wanted to just reassure you that you are definitely not alone. This feeling of unworthiness is felt by a lot of people. And here's the thing that I find really interesting. It's usually felt by successful people. So you're not alone. Studies suggest that 70% of people experience the imposter syndrome at some point or another in their life and in their career. And overall, when you think about the imposter syndrome, it really stems from a high sense of self-doubt. So instead of attributing your success to your skills, somehow we tend to downplay our successes and really attribute it to luck. So here are some signs that you may be experiencing the imposter syndrome. I don't like to say suffering from. Suffering just feels so hard. So you may be experiencing the imposter syndrome. Can you relate to any of these things that I'm going to be sharing with you? And if you can, just make note to self, and maybe it would be important to identify what the triggers are. So when do you notice that these things are really coming to the forefront? When do you notice that these behaviors can be crippling for you? So the first one could be perfectionism. Oh my goodness. Don't we all experience that at some time? So, what that looks like is you may set high goals for yourself, and because your goal is perfection, right? The smallest mistakes you make will cause you to feel like a failure. So, if you have the goals and you're aiming for perfection, you're trapped in this sphere of perfectionism. Sometimes, if you make a mistake, we don't pick ourselves up, we don't learn from it. Instead, we start feeling like a failure. So, we want to start taking a look at that. The second pattern that we may have or behavior is we may attribute our success to luck. And here is where you will downplay your success because you do not believe that you deserve the successes. Or sometimes we just say, hey, we're just lucky, right? We want to think about that. You've worked so hard. You've worked so hard to plan. You've worked so hard to prepare. You've worked so hard to study. You've put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get things done. Yet when you get it, ooh, you sometimes think, oh, I'm just lucky. So we want to start thinking about that. Have you worked hard for something, yet you are attributing your success to mere luck? The downside of that sometimes is that you're unable to recognize your success. And I know that I suffer from this. I'm using that word, right? I know that I've experienced that. So instead of celebrating your accomplishments, sometimes you may worry that others may see the truth. And I'm doing my fingers in quotes like you can see me, right? But you believe that others will see the truth about your skills and your ability because you're having doubt, because you're not celebrating, and because you don't believe in yourself. You really want to think about that for a moment. Do you think that you're caught up in the pattern where you're afraid to do anything that is different, anything that is new, because you're afraid of failure? And when you're afraid of failure, sometimes you may set challenging goals and be disappointed when the goal fails. You might also take on limited tasks because you fear that you will fail. So you're so afraid of failing, right, that you don't try anything new. You don't go after the things that you desire. You want to start looking at those patterns. Another behavior that is associated with that is that you really have difficulty asking for help. So you may be needing some advice, you may be needing some assistance, you may be needing some support. But because we are trapped, right, we are afraid to ask for help. And you may have difficulty asking for help because there is a belief that you have that asking others for help will show that you are wrong or unqualified. So start thinking about that. Are you in that zone of perfectionism? Do you attribute your success to luck? Is it that you're unable to recognize and celebrate your successes? Are you afraid of failing? And do you have difficulty asking for help? When we experience the imposter syndrome, what happens is that it limits your confidence to go after new opportunities because we feel as though we don't deserve it, right? There's this feeling that others deserve it, I don't deserve it. And so we get caught up in a cycle. We get pulled into a loop where we're not able to move forward in a way that feels good to us. We're not able to really move in a space or move beyond where we are because we're so caught up in that imposter syndrome cycle. And it's important that you pause for a moment and that you recognize that. And what does that cycle look like, right? So it probably looks like you get a new goal or task, and usually this is when you see it more often than not. So it could be that you're embarking upon a new goal or task. It could also be that you've started a new job. It could also be that you're doing something that you've never done before. So something new that is presented to you, an opportunity that is presented to you, and it may be the opportunity of a lifetime. It may be the opportunity that will elevate your career. It may be the opportunity that will get you one step closer to the life that you desire and deserve. So when something is the goal or a project or a task is new, right? That's the very first step. So the newness, the unknown, right? The things that you've never tried before, you don't know the results, and so you're afraid. And what happens in that moment is a number of things. Anxiety kicks in, right? And when you're anxious about the results or the end results or how you're going to be performing, or if you try to be the perfectionist, or if you're afraid of failure, there are either one of two ways that can go. You either procrastinate, so you hold yourself back from taking action, or you stress yourself out with over preparation. You somehow sometimes will manage to get the task done, and in that moment, there is just a brief relief, feeling of, I've gotten it done. Whew, and sense of accomplishment. So it's so tiny that you don't celebrate, you don't acknowledge your wins, you don't take a moment to really examine what opportunities they presented themselves for learning, because it's so small that you don't even want to stay there. And then you shift into thinking, oh, that was mere luck. Somebody else would have done a better job. And so even when you're receiving feedback, you sometimes tend to discount the positive feedback because you want to chalk it all up to luck. We can't really embrace the feedback that we're getting. What happens in that moment is that self-doubt creeps in, and then there's an increased sense of self-doubt, anxiety, and then you feel like a fraud. And then what happens is, if you get a new goal or task, you're moving into that space again with that mindset, and the cycle starts all over again. So I want to ask you, do you find that you're in this pattern over and over again, going back and forth and not being able to really own that you are worthy, that you are qualified, that you are deserving, right? Do you find that you're constantly trying to learn new things or add new skills, even though you are fully qualified? So nothing is wrong with learning and growing. But are you that person who you're afraid to commit because you're afraid to fail, because you're always trying to be perfect, right? And so what happens is you think, if I only get a new skill, if I only sign up for a new course, if I only do read another book, if I only listen to another podcast, if I only watch another YouTube video, maybe then I'll be able to learn something new, something additional, because I don't have the skills. I don't have what it takes. I'm not qualified enough. And so what you find in those moments is that you're constantly putting yourself in places and spaces where you want to learn something new, not because it is required, but because you're feeling as though you are not enough. And I was reading an article in the Entrepreneur magazine a couple of days ago, and according to one study, 75% of women in leadership positions have experienced imposter syndrome across their professional journey. And here's the thing: if you are a woman of color, the feeling is amplified. And I know that so well. I've been in spaces where sometimes I am the only black woman there. I've been in spaces to deliver leadership trainings, and I am the only black woman in that room. Sometimes I'm, it's scary, right? Sometimes I want to quit. Sometimes I want to give up. Sometimes I want to turn around. Sometimes I want to pretend like I'm sick. I am afraid of showing up because I'm afraid that in that moment I am not enough, right? Maybe it's because of past experience I've had where I was told that I wasn't enough. Maybe it's because I've been treated in a way that allows me to doubt myself, to doubt my abilities, and to doubt the skills and the experience that I bring into spaces and into rooms. And so, this is something I want you to start thinking about, right? Are you plagued by constant self doubt, right? Do you recognize that the imposter syndrome is really playing up in your life? Do you think that it's really hijacking your success? Do you think that it's really ruining your chances to really go out into the world and to show up as your whole, true, awesome, creative, and resourceful self? Sometimes it could be that we think that, especially for women over 40, I'm too old for that, right? I'm not pretty enough, smart enough. Somebody else can do it, right? And they'll do it much better than I can. Sometimes we're thinking if we happen to build up that courage to get it done, sometimes we're thinking we're not really deserving of, whatever praises that someone will sing us. I want us to start thinking about that. Are you plagued by the imposter syndrome? And what are some things that you can do? We want to talk to mothers today. If you are a mom and if you have your children and if you struggle with the with the imposter syndrome, or if you've experienced the imposter syndrome, sometimes we don't know how to really help our children to really move through that experience if they happen to be having that. So, as mothers and as women, would it be okay to let your children be okay with failing? When we talk about we are afraid of making mistakes ourselves, we want to examine our attitude when our children mess up, when our children make mistakes. This is really a trick question, right? So if you as an adult beat up on yourself for making mistakes, you pout, you get angry, you blame others, guess how your children are going to deal with it? They're going to be dealing with it in the same way, right? So when they make mistakes, right, they're going to start beating up on themselves because that's how mommy behaves. So we want to make sure that we're looking at how is the imposter syndrome creeping into the different areas of our lives? How is the imposter syndrome creeping into our relationships? Are you moving into spaces where you are feeling like you don't belong, you don't deserve the love that you're getting, and as a result, you're playing smaller? As a result, you're causing more challenges to the individual that you're partnering with. Could it be because you've experienced something before? So in that relationship, you may feel unworthy of the affection that you're getting from your significant other. Could it be that you are afraid that your partner will discover that you're not actually that great as they say that you are? Sometimes people sabotage the relationship that they're in and end it before the other person does because you're afraid. Is the imposter syndrome showing up for you at work? Right? So people that experience the imposter syndrome, if you have an imposter mindset, you sometimes think that you're lucky and that your coworker is more deserving. And sometimes you hold yourself back from asking for a raise or applying for a promotion. Right? Sometimes you may also feel that you've overworked yourself to achieve the impossible high standards that you've set for yourself, right? So we want to start think about, are we overworking to achieve standards that are just ridiculously high, and sometimes they may be unnecessary. And I already mentioned that as a parent, sometimes you can probably remember, times when the imposter syndrome kicked in as a parent, sometimes when you felt clueless, you felt incapable and totally unprepared for the huge responsibility of raising these awesome human beings. So we want to start checking with ourselves, and we want to start checking with our feelings, because if these feelings go unchecked, parents may struggle to make decisions for their child out of fear. And that fear is that, oh, I'm going to mess up this child's life. So we want to start thinking about those feelings. We also want to start checking ourselves, right? And how are they showing up? So what are some things that you can do? The first thing I want to offer is you acknowledge the imposter feelings. Recognize when you start feeling like an imposter. So instead of engaging with your thoughts of self-doubt, acknowledge that you are feeling this way and identify your trigger. And when we think about, really understanding our trigger, it's getting to the root cause. Why do you feel like you don't belong? Is this due to the fear of failure? Is it that you believe that you don't deserve success? Why or why not? We want to also start focus on the facts and not the feelings. So when you start feeling like a fraud, focus on positive facts. For example, if you were selected for a job interview, tell yourself, I was selected because I'm qualified, right? So we want to start really affirming the things that we know to be true about ourselves. Another thing that you can probably do, and this is tip number 4, is ask yourself if the thoughts that you're having, are they helping or are they hindering you? Okay. Are they helping me to move towards my goal? Are they hindering me from taking action? Is that thought or feeling driving the results that I want? Is this where I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? If I continue to have these thoughts, how will that thought support my goal? And then we get into reframing those thoughts. So instead of telling yourself that you don't deserve success, reframe your thoughts to give yourself more credit. And girl, make sure that you're enjoying that experience. Own your accomplishments instead of really attributing them to luck or help from others. Instead of setting these standards that are really ridiculously too high and almost impossible, start by setting small goals so you can enjoy the process. Remind yourself that there will never be the perfect time. Accept that we all have to start somewhere. This one may be tough, but accept that it is okay to make mistakes. So instead of fearing failure, develop a healthy response to making mistakes. Accept that it is normal to make mistakes and learn from each mistake instead. So what are you learning in that moment? It is really important as well that you reach out for support. So having a safe space to receive support will help you to reduce the feelings of being an imposter, right? Because it gives you an opportunity to process your thoughts. So when you feel imperfect, because we all are, right? When you make a mistake or you receive a compliment, your first instinct, if you're experiencing that imposter syndrome, will be to hide. So instead, start reaching out to an encouraging mentor, a coach, or a colleague for support. Say thank you when you receive a compliment. I did a photo shoot 2 weeks ago and I got the photos and everybody's, oh my God, Nicole, those photos are amazing. And I go, aren't they? Or sometimes I go, I know, right? And it's not because I'm being vain or cocky or boastful. It's because the pictures look damn good and I'm just acknowledging it. I'm just saying, yeah, thank you. I know, right? They look great. And start by being honest when you feel imperfect or if you feel embarrassed or if you've made a mistake. Just be honest with yourself. I messed up. You're human. You're not a fraud. You're human. We also want to think about how are we sharing and celebrating our achievements and success. So the imposter syndrome can really make you feel like you're not good enough, like you don't belong or you're undeserving. But it is really important to remind yourself that learning and making mistakes don't make you a fraud because sis, you are human. And I think that is what that's the driving force for me behind really taking the time to create a program to really help women who are struggling. And I'm thinking about highly ambitious women who are struggling with the imposter syndrome, right? This course is really for individuals who want to overcome self-doubt and fear of failure that's really holding them back and preventing them from accomplishing their big dreams and goals and things that they want. Those who want to gain more self-confidence so they can go after what they want and know that they are worthy and that they're worth it in their life and especially in their careers. And this is for women who really want to develop a stronger, deeper, and more meaning to the relationships that they're having and be their best selves when they're showing up in those space. So this course that I've designed, Overcoming the Imposter Syndrome, will really help you to understand the science behind how self-doubt really impacts us and our growth and our development. You will also learn and discover ways to overcome self-doubt, and you'll be able to tap into the emotions that are really pulling you down so you can have fewer negative emotions, right? You'll really shed the irrational fears that you're having. You will learn how to stop undervaluing yourself and silence that inner critic. This will also help you to get out of your comfort zone, right? As we quiet those negative voices, and we're going to stop practicing habits of hesitation, procrastination. It's going to also help you to not be so critical of yourself, to not be so hypercritical, hypervigilant, hyper rational, and to get a feeling of unworthiness, right? These are the things that happens in that space. So this course is really designed to help you to get over those things that are holding you back. And so we look at the different types of imposters. There's going to be a self-assessment that you do that really gets to the root of it. And then we look at where is this stemming from, right? You're going to be able to overcome your mental blocks and change the way that you think about yourself. You're going to also create mental scripts that will help you to overcome typical situations that get you into trouble and prevent you from really taking action. And so the classes begin the end of March 30th. Really important for those of us who are looking to really elevate in this amazing year. COVID is going away, the world is opening up, and it is time for us to really step into the life that we desire and that we deserve. And so as you think about achieving your goals and as you think about the challenges that you've experienced in the past, could it be that you are actually experiencing the imposter syndrome? And if it is, instead of doubting yourself, it is time to really step into that woman that you see yourself becoming. It is time to really build your self-esteem and build your self-worth. Remember that making mistakes, that does not make you a fraud. It makes you human. And when you get to that place and space where you can accept, embrace, and acknowledge that gives you an opportunity to create room for the things that you desire. And when you do, hey, you are in fact settling for more. We'll talk soon.